I'm pleased to welcome veteran political journalist Mark Halperin back onto the show. Mark, you were the very first guest we had this year in 2025, and you're now the next to last one for the year. We actually have Scott Jennings in 2 weeks to talk about his new book, but welcome back, pal.
Old friends bookends. Glad to be back. Grateful to
So,
you for including me.
look, it's you're a thoughtful guy. I've gotten a ton of email when I sent around the invitation of people enthusiastic to hear from you. The video from our last chat from January 5th had over 11,500 views. I went back and looked. That's more than twice as many as our next 19 most popular videos combined. I don't quite know why it caught so much fire. You're smart. You said smart stuff, but people, I'm not sure. Somebody must have promoted that because it got found. Of course, it was also at the start of Trump 2.0, with a very fresh look at the 2024 election. So, man, was the market high for that. I want to start with expectations again here. We're almost a year through Trump 2.0. Um, is how is Trump 2.0 consistent with what your expectations were, and how have you found this past year different from your expectations for the president's second term?
How's it consistent? How's it inconsistent with my expectations? Is that your
Yep.
question? I'll do two of each. I could probably do 10 of each. Susie Wiles and Scott Bessent and uh, um, uh, Stephen Miller have played the exact roles I thought they would play. Um,
I'm going to
uh,
interrupt you real
yeah,
quick. I apologize. Only to say a couple of people have suggested your volume is low. It sounds a little tinny to me, but maybe get the mic closer or
hold.
turned up. Sorry.
No, that's not. No, that's right. That's not the problem. It's going to be better now.
You crushed it.
Zoom
Yep.
toggle, Zoom toggle meets the wrong mic.
Sorry.
Susie Wiles, Scott Bessent, and Stephen Miller have played the exact roles I thought they'd play. So that's with expectations on personnel. Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance are significantly more influential than I thought they'd be. So that's one of each. In my expectations, the president is finding it harder to figure out how to make people feel good about the economy than he thought he would. But that's in line with my expectations that they would struggle. And this is both about to be outdated potentially, and not about Trump per se, but the Thune Johnson Trump relationship is much better, at least up until now, than I had thought it would be.
When you say the relationship, it seems like you mean because they follow without complaining, or what? What did you expect from the 2025 Republican Party vis-a-vis Trump and oversight?
Well, I'm not talking about oversight. I'm talking about trying to get stuff done, particularly, obviously, the reconciliation bill. I thought that I did not anticipate that Thune and Johnson would work. And again, this has all been true up until now. It's at the most ragged point it's been. It's getting to where I thought it would be. But I didn't anticipate that they would work together so well, both from a collegiality point of view, but also from just a squaring the circle point of view. Right? They're very different politics. 60 votes in the Senate versus what the speaker can do. I didn't think I'm not alone in having underestimated the speaker pretty dramatically. And I think, again, up until recently, because of the off-year elections, and fear about the midterms, and concern about the economy, they've been very deferential to the White House. They've been very comfortable deferring to the White House, and the White House Legislative Affairs team, although they're being panned now, I thought for the first 10 months did an extraordinarily good job being in touch with folks on the Hill, and kind of hitting the sweeter spot than a lot of presidents do, which is which is not wanting to be looking like you're usurping their prerogatives on domestic policy, on foreign policy, national security. They're comfortable doing that, but not wanting to be seen as usurping, but being in touch enough that there's a common set of tactics and a common strategy.
Do you think I'm wrong in my observation, just to stay on those relationships because they're fascinating to me? It felt like in Biden and President Obama, a lot of that was turned to Nancy Pelosi, who, is sort of the Tom Brady of speakers, and have her drive a lot and get a lot of the stuff that needed to get done. Here, I am more of the impression that in the House in particular, the strategy is, first down, second down, third down, hand the ball off to Trump. That's the only way to deal with the narrowness of the margin and the challenge of the Freedom Caucus. Um, am I misperceiving? Am I being unfair to the speaker? Um, was there maneuvering there to get Trump out of a jam, or at the end of the day, is the strategy handed off to the president?
Well, I think it's case by case, but in general, I think the dynamic is what you described. The speaker's power derives solely from the president. We've never really seen that, at least not in my career. If the president withdrew his support, the speaker would be in trouble. But the president's well aware now, after the McCarthy experience, there's literally no one else who could get enough votes to become speaker. So the president's power over him is not absolute, because he knows that the president knows that if the president decided to take him out, it would create a lot of disarray, and it would be difficult. Eventually, they'd find someone, but it would be difficult. And the president, and this is Susie's influence as much as anything else. Although he's as Jeb Bush would call him, he's a chaos president. There's a lot more order here than there was in the first term, obviously, and there's a lot more value put on having orderliness where that can prevail. And it largely, again, it's a little bit different right this minute, but for the bulk of the first year, it's pretty
Yeah.
peaceful. They're
Lincoln
not
likes
not a lot
the
of tactical or strategic differences between them in terms of how they want to achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah, it seems also there's no substitute for having been the president if you want to know how to president.
Yeah.
And nobody, not since Grover Cleveland, has a second termer had 4 years to rest, reconsider, and plan anew.
Yeah,
Um,
and just I'm sorry, just to say off of that, because these are two important points to go to the expectations thing. Obviously, he and America First Policy Institute and other efforts spent the 4 years, and not only were they prepared on personnel and policy, and not only but they were better rested than a normal second term president. Normally, you go into second term, a lot of people stay, but they're burnt out. Everybody came in fired up. I believe that the two most inexplicable miscalculations that I still can't explain are there's never been an effort to figure out how to get 60 votes in the Senate for anything. They've never laid any groundwork. There's never been any strategy to get 60 votes for anything at all. Difficult. And rare earth minerals in China. They went to war earlier with China. You talk about my expectations. I had been strongly led to believe that they were not going to pick this fight with China until next year. They picked the fight far earlier, and they went into a fight where the other side had the high card. I mean, there's just no ambiguity. They had the high card, the higher card than the U.S. market, higher card than technology. And I can't get anyone to explain to me why they decided to pick the biggest fight they will have over the entire term. There's nothing bigger than this existential fight with China. And they went into it completely aware. They should have been completely aware that they didn't have anything that could overcome that problem.
yeah, it's funny you say that. I've been asking every author that I've had, and the geopolitical people like Hal Brands and Patrick McGee, who wrote Apple in China, and Dan Wong, who wrote Breakneck. I mean, I've had a great series of folks, and I've asked everyone, how did we get ambushed by what seems obvious, and frankly, what the president of China said their strategy was: be less reliant on us and make us more reliant on them. It's been a decade where they've been putting it in place, and it was right there in plain view. And you're right; it's they turned over bigger cards. The theory, I think, is the presumption that they'd be worried about loss of access to our market, but our pain threshold's lower than theirs, it feels like. What's
Yeah.
crazy though, Mark, is that rare earths isn't necessarily the best card they've got, and we didn't play ours. In theory, we could kick them out of the financial system, and they could stop sending pharmaceuticals to us. But those are kind of those are nuclear options in economic warfare, and thank God we didn't end up in either of those.
Yes, sir. Agree
Starting with
completely.
you're one of the OG election guys. Let's go. It's a month out. A month ago, we had the 2025 elections, and the big marquee ones were in Virginia and New Jersey at the governorships, the California ballot initiative, and of course in your home city there in New York, where you have a new mayor. Congratulations. Um, it- what are your takeaways from 2025? What should people trying to anticipate where we are and where we're going know about the elections of last month?
I'll just do my top three, and if you want to drill down on those or have me list more, I can. Number one, even though the Democratic Party is in disarray and the National Committee is very weak, and National Chairman is weak, Republicans have not entered a new phase where they can raise a lot more money, or they have turnout superiority or technical superiority or digital media superiority. They both sides have strengths and weaknesses, but I could have imagined, given the disarray of the Democrats and the strength of many of the people on the president's political team, that the Republicans would go into 26 and 28 with a vast superiority in those areas, and they don't have it. Number two, the voters who allowed the president to win in 24, the margin created by younger males of all races in particular, they are now parked in the middle. They are not still with the Republican Party. Maybe in 26 there'll be individual candidates who can win them. Maybe the Republican nominee in 28 can win them back. But they're no longer part of a sort of Trump coalition of the Trump ascendant coalition, and that is have huge implications, however it ends up for the future. And then finally, again, least original point I could make. If you're the party in power and the economy is not being experienced positively by voters, you're going to be punished, and you're going to have a lower approval rating, and even people in your own camp are going to not be pleased. The president's approval rating with his own party is still really high, but that's not enough to win these elections. And when your approval rating with independents is 25%, you're going to be wiped out. So that has to change if the Republicans are going to keep control of the House. And if it's really 25% approval rating on the economy with independents, they'll lose the Senate as well. Maybe Senate races make their own wind and weather, so it's very hard to predict that. And the map still is really ominous and daunting for Democrats. So I'm not saying they'll win the Senate back, but they could under these conditions.
Well, I'm going to come back to the midterms in a minute. It's, two other things that I find interesting are first, um, the I'm not sure that some of the younger voters and some of the particularly younger men of color were Republicans in 2024. A lot of this seems to again be when Trump's on the ballot. It has a different gravitational pull than when Trump's president, but not on the ballot. The other thing that I find interesting, and I'd love your take on both that observation and the observation that when I started in politics, the Republican voters were the more likely to turn out voters. And so the higher the turnout, the better for Democrats, and the lower the turnout back when I was starting out, the better for Republicans. That has decidedly flipped. And at this point, the higher the turnout, the better for Republicans. Nate Silver's analysis said that if every potential voter had actually voted in 24, Trump would have won by even more based upon whatever weird math he does. What's your take on the Trump's got to be on the ballot for the GOP and the less frequent voters are now Republicans?
Well, on the second point, the thing that it relates to that and runs parallel to it is it used to be in the olden days, Republicans were better at early vote and Democrats were better at same day, and now that's flipped as well. I think it's a little. I think it's necessary to slice this piece of salami in two when we say when Trump's not on the ballot. Historically, in the sample space we have, which is large enough to have it be meaningful, that's true. But I think it's worth considering, why is it true? Okay, is it because people will only vote when they can also vote for Trump? Is it because when he's not on the ballot, he doesn't campaign, right? I think a lot of Trump's strength has been in his two presidential wins has been he puts on a good show. He, by going in person, by being out there in media for advocating for people to vote, that engages people, it raises awareness, it revs people up. And so he did not campaign in Virginia or New Jersey. The vice president didn't either. And I'm not saying had they done it, the result would have been different. But I think one question we have for next year is, will those two guys campaign? And if so, where will they go? There aren't very many places that would want Donald Trump right now in battleground places because he's not very popular. But I think you're going to see a pretty full debate whether his approval rating is 38 or 45, which is, I think, probably the band we're talking about. I think you're going to see a debate about whether he should do that. And remember, they're supposed to have a convention. They're supposed to have this weird midterm convention, and obviously the president will be a big part of that. And they haven't done that before. And so, why are they doing that? I know it's because there's a school of thought among some of the president's advisors that maybe the reason that they haven't done as well when the president's not on the ballot is because the president hasn't really been doing the things he did for himself. And I'm not saying they'll definitely do it, but they're considering it. And that convention is a leading indicator of their philosophy that maybe the thing to do is to go for broke, knowing that if Trump comes to, New Hampshire to campaign in the Senate race, it's going to rev up Democrats quite a bit. But the thought is, well, when he campaigned in the battleground states for himself, he won them. And when he hasn't gone places, they haven't done well. So that's an intra-Trump world debate that I think will be interesting to watch how it's settled. But I would guess that he's going to campaign more than he did in the off years.
Yeah, I wonder. I think my instincts are aligned with those who think it's Trump as the product, because he is the blow up the establishment product, as opposed to, you can parachute him in, but if you're running Roy Moore, you're not going to win. And the really interesting thing will be his willingness to go into the very low percentages, because that'll impact his batting average.
Yeah.
Um, so we just had the special in Tennessee. The R's won by 9, which is a win. At the same time, as with all the recent specials, maybe because it's the party out of power, maybe because it's the less frequent voters. You jumped to the Senate already, but what do we now know for the midterms? I'm interested in your expectations first for the House and then for the Senate.
Well, I know the president likes to say it's a hoax, but voters care about the economy, and they don't see any reason to feel good about it in most cases, and they don't see any reason to think the president has a theory of the case about the economy. Whatever the opposite of the explainer in chief is what Donald Trump is on the economy. And again, in Tennessee, you look at the ads run by the Democratic nominee. Almost every line in her ads could have been a Trump ad from 24, running against Washington, running against special interest, saying she'd be on the side of the people. So there's so much conversation in the media and amongst Republicans and Democrats about the president having to try and find the sweet spot between saying things, pointing out his accomplishments on the economy, promising things will get better, and but being sensitive to people not feeling good about the economy. I don't dismiss that entirely, but to me, it's about whether the vice president and the secretary of the treasury were correct in the cabinet meeting. Is the economy actually going to be better next year? That's it. That's the whole thing. So that question will answer, I believe, more than anything else, what the outcome is. There are very few races in play unless the Republican Party doesn't improve its position at all from what we saw in Tennessee. They're not going to be more than 25 House races in play. To move it above that number is going to take putting a lot of races in play that aren't currently in play under ordinary circumstances. Democrats and Republicans have some primaries, but Republicans are defending more, or Democrats are defending more incumbent held seats in districts won by Trump than vice
13,
versa.
13 to 3, yeah.
Yeah. And the Republicans will have money. The Republicans are dealing with the Democratic Party, who is going to have some nominees who are as liberal and out of step with the district as we saw in Nashville. But they're going up against two things primarily: history. The president's party almost never does well in midterm elections, and they're going up against the sour mood on the economy. I will tell you, anybody who says they know who's going to control the House, I think just is lying to you. There's no way to know. We have to see who the nominees are. We have to see what the state of the economy is. We have to see what the state of spending is in these races, and then not just who the nominees are, but candidate quality. If you ask me today, I would say that history is probably the trump card on this, and Democrats would probably take control. But if the economy is as good as Scott Bessent claims it's going to be, I'd flip and say Republicans have a very good chance of keeping the majority. The Senate races, we've got to see again who the nominees are, because Democrats, in Maine, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, or in sorry, what's the third one? Oh, sorry, and then on the other side, Republicans in Georgia. We have to see who the nominees are, and we have to see how they perform and how much money they raise. I'm super interested in grassroots fundraising. Everybody can bundle. Everybody can have a super PAC. Grassroots fundraising not only gives you access to a lot of money, but it demonstrates intensity. And so I want to see how these nominees in the Senate and the House and the contested races and both sides do on grassroots fundraising. But this is most simply, Republicans would be favored to hold the Senate. Democrats would be favored to take the House. That's the base case, no matter what happens for the next 5 months. In 5 months, let's see if the economy is better. Let's see who's won some of these primaries. Until then, that's the best I think anybody could tell you.
Yeah, you're right. That's conventional wisdom, and it is for a logical reason. It'd be crazy to assume either of the counterfactuals without more a really good theory of the case. But let me ask you this, Mark. As you know, it's not unemployment, it's not inflation, and it's not GDP growth that correlates most closely with House outcomes. It's presidential approval.
Yeah.
And while presidential approval correlates a lot with how people feel about the economy, even the only since World War II, we've had 20 midterms. 18 of them have seen the party holding the White House lose more than the three seats, the two seats now they can afford to lose. The two other times were in 2002 when it was a 9/11 wartime president, in 1998 when it was really a referendum on Gingrich and the perceived overreaching Congress, Republicans in Congress, or a referendum on them. Uh, if the economy is right, if Bessent's right, let's say we get to 3.5% growth. Does President Trump's approval get to the 63 and 66% that we saw in 98 and 2002? What's his ceiling for a presidential approval given everything else he says and does?
I think it's 46, but I think 46 would be enough because 46 would be the national number, right? But it really only matters in the states and the districts that have competitive races. So I think if it's at 46 nationally, which again I think is his ceiling, but even if it's at 44 or 45, if it's at 47 or 48 in some of these competitive places, and if the Democrat candidate quality isn't as good, and they've got defund the police type problems, and in the Senate, same thing, where Senate races are more independent of the national mood than the House races are. It's not impossible that Republicans could do pretty well. They're not going to do super well because there just aren't that many seats in play and they're running against history. But they could do well enough to keep unified control today. But certainly highly dependent on the, not just as you said, the economy matters less than the approval rating. But my sense is the president's approval rating, like most presidents, is going to be driven by the economy more than any other single thing.
Um, yeah, it's you and I will be talking a lot about it. One of the things I love about reading your work every day, and I'm always impressed when I had my 100th Sunday Substack in a row. I forget what number you had, but you had like 10 million days in a row. So hats off to your Ripken-esque Iron Man status. Um,
Thank you.
what I like about what not only that you're always there and you're always interesting, but some days it's you are countering those attacking Trump. Some days you're countering those attacking the Democrats, and you're all over the place, kind of neither fear nor favor. Um, one of the narratives that you've written some about and that some are writing about is whether there is a current or pending Trump MAGA divorce. People look at MTG. People look at the unhappiness with Epstein. The he was hired to stop forever wars, and we sure have a lot of gunboats off the coast of Venezuela. Um, what's your take on the president standing with his base?
I'm gonna turn on some lights because it's getting dark faster than I thought. So give me just a moment.
Yeah, you bet. We're trying to shed light on the topic, so I appreciate the visual stunt there as well.
I would say that my answer to your question is always err on the side of assuming the relationship's good. Again, his approval rating with the party is quite high. His approval rating with MAGA, the MAGA part of the party, is even higher. Um, you know, there are certainly a lot of areas of conflict, but I think people are forgetting that there were areas of conflict both in the first term and in the interregnum, and it really it makes for good copy for the media. But I think you have to ask yourself, what's the impact of it? What's the real world impact, both on Washington process and on the real lives of real people, and in terms of recruitment and support for candidates in the midterms? And I don't see much. Again, it produces a lot of good stories, but I don't see really much impact on anything, at least not so far. And I don't think because of the binary polarization that we have, I don't think there'll be people staying home because they didn't like the disclosure rate of the Epstein documents or they don't like the forever wars. There's not going to be any American troops on the ground anywhere. There's not going to be any wars that are costing us a ton of money or blood or treasure. So I don't think that's going to be a flashpoint. The tariffs is a big one. Tariffs is a big one, not because MAGA doesn't like them, because the establishment doesn't like them, but they've been able to finesse that, and most rich people are not being hurt that much by the tariffs. Not everybody, but most people. And a lot of the president's undercovered story, their care and feeding of corporate CEOs is unprecedented. The amount of face time they get with senior officials, including the president, the degree to which they have input on policy is very high. Now, there's some areas like the visas that you have different sectors of the economy have different points of view, but I just don't see as much deterioration in the relationship as is often portrayed. And where there is deterioration, I just don't see the real world impact of it very much, at least not so far.
I want to turn to some of the policy, although I note on visas, I'm not, on the immigration stuff, I'm not sure I've met any sectors of any business leaders who are happy with where it's going. I think many in the base, obviously everybody
Yeah,
wanted a secure southern border, and many in the base are happy with the deportations. The business guys are somewhere between scared and if you're in construction, if you're in ag, if you need nurses, a lot of businesses are really worried about what that means for workforce. But
yeah.
something about Trump that we've all observed is he's not a big one for acknowledging mistakes with words, but he does pivot policy. And when something isn't working, he tries other things from time to time. Liberation Day leaps to mind. I can think of several others. Where do you see the administration doubling down on policy in 2026? And where do you see them trying to pivot and how?
Well, as you know, we're in a period now, depending on when State of the Union is, of 2 months or 2.5 months, when the search is on to find policies that will make the economy better, and that's that's an ongoing interagency process with lots of input from the Hill, from private sector, and from the cabinet departments. Emphasis is on housing and getting money into the pockets of people, and on energy and on regulation. I don't know what they're going to end up with State of the Union. I will tell you so far, when I have conversations with people about what's in the State of the Union and what's the 2026 agenda, and healthcare also, I get a lot of lists of things that have been considered and found to be not workable, either unpopular, president doesn't like them, or in many cases they don't think they'd solve the problem. And in some cases, they think it'd be worse. So I don't know the answer, but I can tell you this: if we had Stephen Miller and Scott Bessent and the president on here and JD, and we asked them, "What's your agenda?" they'd give you no better an answer than I gave you, which is to say they don't know what they're going to do. There's some appetite to do another reconciliation bill. Again, they blundered into this position where they can't pass anything with 60 votes, so they can't do anything that very significant next year without just using another reconciliation package. They're very divided over healthcare. I can't tell you what's going to happen between now and January on that, but that's symbolically representative of where they are, which is some people want to do a bicameral bipartisan thing. Some people want to do partisan things through reconciliation. Some want to do partisan things and just dare Democrats to vote no. So they don't agree philosophically. They don't agree politically. and they don't agree, and this is even within the administration, and they don't agree on policy. They don't have a shared agenda of what they want to do. And the president, is not a policy wonk, but they have pretty good shared sense of housing, healthcare, energy, regulation, and then things like food prices, right? Those are the things they'd like to work on, but they don't have an agenda. They don't have policy points. They don't have even more executive orders that they're particularly bullish on at this time.
All right, so let's keep back to politics, which we both find fascinating. And I'm sure this is 10 times truer for you than me, but whenever I speak, I always get asked at some point in the Q&A about 2028. Obviously, you've written bestsellers about nomination battles. So I think 2028 is going to be an extraordinary election on countless ways. First, both are going to have open primaries. Both have, certainly the Democrats have a meaningful fight for what's the future direction of their party. The Republicans may well have a fight for what's the post-Trump direction of the party. A lot may depend on how successful he still is. I'd love your take. We'll start with the Democrats. We'll go to the Republicans on who do you think the most capable political athletes are, and how. I know we're years ahead, so you're just theorizing now. How do you see first the Democratic nomination battle playing out, and then how do you see the GOP successor to Trump nomination battle playing out? Start with the D's. Who are you watching? How's it gonna? Who's gonna win and why?
I'm in the midst of a very big reporting project on the first question, and just did a 25-minute monologue on my Next Up show, which is about to post on it. And so, if you want a fuller answer, you can go listen to that because I'm not going to talk for 25 minutes here. Um, this is the weakest field either party's ever had in my lifetime. It is. It is difficult for anyone to get much of a leg up, with the exception of Gavin Newsom, because no one knows what states are going to vote early. So while there's been some travel to Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, there's been very little. And if you look at the question of who wins the nomination, and I urge you all as you think about evaluating candidates, there is a connection between being strong in the nomination fight and strong in the general, but they're fundamentally different questions. And the only question I'm answering right here is nomination fight. I'm not speaking to the general, except to the extent that some voters, as in 92, I'm quite confident in the Democratic Party, will look to candidates who they think can win a general. They do not want to lose the White House again. So that's one of many indices people will look at. So number one, there's no early states. So there's no way to evaluate on that metric. And historically, Joe Biden was a bit of an exception. You have to win an early state to be the nominee historically. But if you don't know what the early states are, you can't start campaigning in early states in an aggressive way. So that's weird. The weakness of the field is weird. And the fact that the party is further left than it's ever been in our lifetime makes it up in the air about who might be the nominee. Some people tell me AOC has a great chance to be the nominee because that's the mood of the party. I don't agree. Some people tell me Governor Beshear has a great chance to be the nominee because the party will look for a male, white, Southern moderate. I don't agree with that either. I don't think either of them are particularly strong for the nomination, but I know very smart people who do. Okay, I look at basic questions of mechanics: who can put together a team, who can raise the money, whose family will be for this, who can match Trump in what Steve Elmendorf, the Democratic lobbyist, calls the three A's, which is attention, uh, activity, and authenticity. Okay, I look at all those things. But the main thing I look at is who has a vision for the country, who has a policy revision, a policy record, who can go out there with authenticity, activity, and and get attention, and can say, here's where I think we are as a nation, and here's where I'd like to take us, and here's why you can be confident I know how to take you there. Joe Biden didn't have that, and he won because of COVID and because of Donald Trump's errors. But the last four presidents taking up most of the last 30 years, I believe that's why all of them won. Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump. They all won because they said, here's where the country is. Here's what I've talked about for decades. Here's what I'm going to do as president. And so that's what I look for. And I will tell you that with very few exceptions, there's almost no Democrat even contemplating running who has that. I believe that Gavin Newsom has moved to an extraordinary position, very similar to Bush in 97 and 98, which is Bush, in an interview with David Broder, compared himself to a cork on a raging river. He just found himself, with the secret hand of Karl Rove and others, he found himself in a commanding position for the nomination. With the exception of Hillary Clinton in 2016, when there's been a frontrunner in the Democratic Party since Mondale, the frontrunner's been the nominee. I would argue in 92 and in 2000, in 92 and one other year, I'm blanking on the other year, there wasn't a front runner. But 88 and 92, there weren't front runners. But otherwise, there have been, and that person's been the nominee. Now, they go through existential political scares, but they become the nominee. And I believe unambiguously, Gavin Newsom's become the front runner. And I think he'll stay that way for a long time because of the 3 A's. Nobody can match him. He's got the best staff, too. He's got the best fundraising capacity. He knows how to go on television. He can pass my Obama test. He can go on Meet the Press. He can go on Monday Night Football, and he can go on entertainment shows, The Tonight Show, and do really well. So I think he's in a commanding position. Now, I can tell you a million reasons why Gavin Newsom would be a weak general election candidate, and I can tell you 500,000 reasons why parts of the Democratic base don't like him, and it'll be hard for him to win the nomination. But he is in a commanding position right now because he's punched, for a lot of reasons, but mostly because he's punched the ticket of opposing Trump with vigor. And he's a battleship. There aren't many battleships even thinking about running. Now, I'd speak to him fairly regularly, and I don't think he's going to run. I've stopped saying that publicly because people tell me I'm nuts, including people who work for him, although they've got a vested interest. I don't think his kids want him to run. I know his kids don't want him to run, and I think the kind of dad he is, he's not going to run. The level of scrutiny that would come on his record and on his personal life, I think will destroy that family, and I don't think he wants that. So it's a strange position to take. I think he's the front runner if he does run, but in the end, I think he might get in, but then I think there'll be scrutiny and he'll get out. That's my sense of it. I think Governor Shapiro is the strongest by a lot of measures, including he and Gavin Newsom are the only two people in the party thinking about running for president, unless you count Senator Slotkin, who have thought about why Donald Trump won. Seems to me a pretty fundamental question if you want to be the Democratic nominee to say, I'll take the White House back. How did Trump win twice? In a party that believes Donald Trump is Satan, you have to ask yourself, I think, with some reflection, how did Donald Trump win? And Gavin Newsom and Governor Shapiro have thought a hell of a lot about it. And they've got things to say about it that I think are quite smart. Almost no one else who's thinking about running has thought about it in a serious way. And on the other hand, if you haven't read the profile of Governor Shapiro in the Atlantic, I strongly recommend it to you. 5'8" Jew, hated by almost every Democrat in his state. Good luck. That's a handicap. There are no perfect candidates in the race, but being a 5'8" Jew, I think is going to make it difficult. Bruce, how tall's Ken?
5'8".
Yeah, there you go.
He might say 5'9", but that's with the fro.
Yeah. So I think those are the two strongest. And I think the drop-off after that is extraordinary. Now, I'm partial to Michael Bennet, who's running for governor. And I think if Michael wins, he may well run for president, which he's already done. And I think Michael has everything. He's not a fiery guy, but I think Michael would be an extraordinarily interesting candidate in this cycle. The country tends to pick someone who's the opposite of the incumbent. And there's no one in America more opposite to Donald Trump than Michael. Everybody else on the list, Moore, Pritzker, AOC, Whitmer, Buttigieg, Rahm Emanuel. We'll talk about Rahm in 1 second. I don't see them becoming the nominee. I just don't think they have the aircraft carrier capacity. Rahm is probably the favorite of many people on here, at least demographically. I think Ari could have a super PAC that raised $1 billion. I think Rahm would bundle better than anyone's ever bundled. I don't know how he'd be as a grassroots fundraiser. I think Rahm's problems with the base are just too fundamental. And we're also back to a 5'8" Jew. I just don't see it. I know Rahm really well. I've known him for a very long time. He's self-consciously mimeographed Bill Clinton 92. And he's saying, let's talk about issues that affect the real lives of real people. Let's bring our party back to the center. He is not Bill Clinton. I knew Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was a candidate I covered. Rahm Emanuel is no Bill Clinton. And I believe the scrutiny that he would get on his personal and professional life would also really be difficult to survive. People who run for president make the mistake of thinking Bill Clinton survived what he survived in 92 and Donald Trump survived what he survived in 2016. I'll survive my stuff too. Just not the case. It's just not the case. Those two guys are magic. and Rahm is not magic. So I'm very skeptical of everyone else, everybody else. Somebody will be the nominee, but I find everybody else to be really, really far from what it normally takes to win a nomination. Want me to say anything more about the Democrats or switch to Republicans?
No, you've said I'm eager to hear the 25-minute version.
Yeah.
That was great and exhaustive, and I love. I mean, Senator Bennett is a really thoughtful.
Yeah.
You're right. He is. He's just. He is. It's not quite West Wing level, but he's got a
Pretty
great.
close. Pretty
He's got a.
close.
Well, yeah. He's not. Doesn't have kind of the Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah.
Everything is almost too clever in the snappy speaking, but he's a really thoughtful guy. He's very well liked. He's not a buffoon in any way, shape, or form. He's it's easy to believe that he wants the best for the country
Yeah.
from a what I personally would love to see in terms of a political system healing. If he were the Dem nominee, that's great. Now do the Republicans, and is there
Yeah.
anybody on his side who would actually make this thing a thoughtful? The other side is not the threat to your way of life. The other side is the loyal opposition. I'd love to
Yeah.
get back to that.
Yeah.
Bennett on the Dems would bring you back to that for his take. Give me
Yeah.
the Republicans.
Let me say one more thing about the Democrats, which will apply to some Republicans. Because there's no early state calendar, people are putting off decisions, and I think they'll put them off for a good long while. Lots of the people considering running have kids of an age where it will be a challenge to run with the kids. And I think what's going to happen is people are going to really put it off till after the midterms. And then a year from now, literally, they're going to be gathering family and talking about it and bringing their advisors in. And they're going to say, okay, well, we got to hire people. We got to raise how much money. We got to do self-oppo. We got to look at the kids' social media accounts. And I think a lot of them are going to run up against the clock. A lot of people who are talked about as near certain to run are not going to run because they're going to run out of time and they're going to see how daunting it is. On the Republican side, I assumed until a few weeks ago that J.D. Vance would be endorsed by Trump and he'd be the nominee. He's the most influential vice president in my career, more influential than Mondale, more influential than Cheney. He's so influential. It's an underreported story of the
More than
administration.
Cheney. Wow.
More than Cheney. More than because Cheney's influence was largely international. Vance is influential on everything, including congressional relations, domestic policy, personnel. Cheney had a lane. Vance has no lane, and I still think that's the base case. I still think the president will likely endorse him, and he'll team up with Marco Rubio, and they'll raise $1 billion or $2 billion, more likely, before the New Hampshire primary. That's still the base case for me. But three things have happened in the last 3 weeks that have caused me to revise and extend my point of view. Number one, the donor class. Again, I invoke the group here on the Zoom. The donor class is the least favorably disposed towards J.D. Vance of anybody I know. They want a contest. They don't love Trump. They don't want more MAGA. They find in J.D., who's underreported a ton of private sessions. If you're a Republican donor and you haven't been invited to one, you should be a little annoyed because he's done a ton of meetings at the White House, at the NAVOPs, and in New York and elsewhere, and he's rubbing people the wrong way. I've come to believe he's not a fake, and I thought he was, as many did, but many people think he's a fake and a phony and unctuous. And so, if the donor class isn't for him, it's not dispositive, but I think it means something, both practically in terms of raising money, but also in terms of what it says about how people get exposed to him feel about him. Number two, the economy. I mean, I don't think he'll be unchallenged if Scott Bessent and the vice president himself are wrong and the economy is horrible. I just don't see him being unchallenged because it would be foolish to say, give us 4 more years of the economy we've saddled you with for 4 years. And right now, it's the most confusing economy I've ever covered. I really don't understand where it's headed, but I'm more bearish than bullish. So that's number two. And number three, Ted Cruz is running. I look like a fool. I'm a big fan of Ted Cruz personally, and I think he's done a number of things in the last couple months that are pure principle, not jockeying, although they'll help him if he decides to run, particularly with the donor class. Opposing tariffs, speaking out on anti-Semitism and Tucker, speaking out about the FCC commissioner's abuse of power to try to tell the private sector what to do. Ted Cruz is, run before. feels it's his time. And I was at an event a few days ago, and one of the most influential and important people in Republican politics made some reference to Cruz running and some aspect of it. And I said, well, Cruz probably is not going to run. That's a suicide mission. And he looked at me with a pity in his eyes and said, Mark, I thought you were a better reporter than that. And I made some calls. Ted Cruz is running. And I think he is I don't say he's JD Vance's worst nightmare, but he could make it interesting. And lastly, I'll say this. JD Vance may have the glassest jaw in American political history. We do not know. He hasn't been in politics very long. He had a contested primary for the Senate, but the other candidates weren't particularly good. And presidential is a different thing. And he was on national ticket for 2 months with Donald Trump. We have no idea, but there's reason to believe that maybe he's not that great. I've come to believe that he's a genius. I've come to believe that his political skills, his rhetorical skills, his media skills are extremely high level, extremely high level. But at the same time, if Ted Cruz takes a big old haymaker to his chin, he may knock him right out of the race. I just don't think he can rule that out. So I would say Marco will not challenge the vice president. I can't see too many other people thinking they could raise sufficient money to make it a race. But at this point, I could see Cruz doing it, and I'm told he's going to, unless he doesn't. In other words, his plan is to do it.
That would be one unbelievable series of debates if it comes to pass.
It
So
would.
uh, you've been awesome. You and I could do this for lots and lots more time with beers, perhaps. But given the time, I'm going to ask one last question, which I teased, so I wanted to at least get to it, which is the question of: are we in a golden age of political journalism? I'm really torn because on the one hand, there's I feel like through your Substack, through so many I get access to so many interesting people, less filtered by a smaller number of gatekeepers. I build my own reading list, and I'm, as I always urge everybody, I balance my media diet. I read left, I read right, I read tech, I read politics, I read finance. At the same time, the audience is atomized. The incentive structure is outrage, not truth, not take your time and get it right. I'm interested, I think of political journalism in my lifetime, and you've been there at every moment as a real leader. I mean, back when it was by fax machine, by email, the blogosphere, Substack, when it was, went to four networks, then cable became a big thing, and now you've got and Megan's got, your own YouTube networks. Net net, is the country and our politics better off thanks to the technology impact on the media, or have we gotten ourselves where the internet has broken politics?
Well, I got more.
And you have 2 minutes.
All right. I have more to say about this than I do about politics. I first time started my own company called Two Way that's trying to revolutionize media through participatory, serious, hour-long participatory conversations on live two-way video, building authentic community. And so I'm a little caught up in that, and I host 12 shows a week, 12 1-hour shows a week, on 10 on Two Way and 2 hours on Megyn Kelly's network. So my son would say the media is broken because he thinks that's too much work. It's better than it was 5 years ago because there are places doing serious work that have a business model and understand technology. We didn't have that. What we had 5, 10 years ago was places that were going out of business, slowly dying, losing audience, and not really understanding what to do. Now, not every legacy place has a business model. The problem with the smaller market size, atomized market, is if someone bombed the federal building in Oklahoma City right now, Megyn Kelly would not send anyone. I would not send anyone. I might go myself, but I wouldn't send 60 people. If the president launches an attack in Latin America, Megyn Kelly's not sending anyone. Tucker's not sending anyone. The podcast bros, Pod Save America, they're not sending anyone. Megan and I aren't filing Freedom of Information Act requests. And if we did and they denied it, we're not going and hiring a lawyer to litigate to try to get it done. There's certain things that require economies of scale. And the only effort, I think, to address this is Barry Weiss at CBS. And I think that's why what Barry's doing is so important, because CBS has size, they have footprint. And I don't think we can live in a world where all we have are bloggers going on and podcasters rather going on each other's shows. We need some big places, and I don't think anybody's starting any new big places that have that level of economy of scale. That's a crisis for our democracy and the role that my profession needs to play in it. In terms of business, in terms of what consumers want, because consumers don't care if we send 60 people to Oklahoma City or file Freedom of Information Act requests. People are connecting directly to talent. They're connecting directly to content producers whose personalities they like, whose credibility and point of view they trust. And that, I think, is whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's inevitable. That's why Fox is doing so much now to acquire brands, individual brands, because they know how powerful that is. At the same time, I believe the power of Candace Owens is one of the most dangerous and underexplored realms in America today, which is to say, Candace is not helping the country. Candace is hurting the minds of young people. And if you've never listened to a full episode of Candace Owens' podcast, I urge you to do it. It is crazy. It's crazy what she says. And she's so popular. And so this is dangerous because there's no good check on that. So we're better off than we were 5 or 10 years ago. We see the emergence of new models. I hope my company's super successful, and I think it will be. And I think my company's doing serious things that brings all voices under one roof. But unfortunately, mostly what we have are declining legacy places and individual brands, many of which are not doing serious work. They're simply providing entertainment. So net better than 5 or 10 years ago. And net better that liberally biased voices don't dominate the national town square as thoroughly as they did. All that's good, but I'm still super worried about most of the things out there. And again, super bullish on what I'm doing because I think it'll stand out in the marketplace for people who want something different.
And if people want to follow you, I'll make it a last question. Where are you going to point listeners who have been sticking around and want to read you and hear you more consistently than when I have you on?
So there's 4 places you can go. Unfortunately, it's not all consolidated in one place. Go to twoway.tv, and you can see how to watch my shows. I do 2 a day, 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. You can watch or listen to 2 video podcasts I do a week on the Megyn Kelly Network called Next Up. You can go to any platform and find Next Up Halperin to see that show. I write the Monday through Monday every day, 2,700 days in a row or so newsletter. It's very expensive. Some of you can afford it. That Bruce subscribes to, called Concierge Coverage, Wide World of News Concierge Coverage. You'll find that on Substack. And then I have a free Substack called Wide World of News, separate from Wide World of News Concierge Coverage, that you can sign up for and get for free. Those are my main things that you can enjoy. I do a few other things, but those would be the main ones. And I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all and to get to sell my wares here at the end. So thank you, Bruce.
Thanks, Mark. Great to see you. Happy holidays.
Okay. Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you.